They wanted drama, the kind that screams, the kind that begs for witnesses, the kind that leaves everyone feeling important in the wreckage. They wanted slammed doors, raised voices, shaking hands, and public scenes. What they never saw coming was the kind of ending that doesn't echo at all. What they received instead was a tragedy so quiet it took them months to understand they were standing in it. They expected tears as proof of damage. They expected chaos as proof of impact. They expected the audience to gather and choose sides. What they got was a disappearance so clean it felt unreal, as if the story simply forgot one of its main characters and kept moving forward without explanation. There is a special cruelty in being denied a final fight. Drama gives people the illusion of meaning. It tells them the destruction mattered. Tragedy does not ask for permission. It arrives, closes the door, and leaves no stage behind. They rehearsed your breakdown like it was their victory speech. They imagined the timing, the script, the moment where you would finally collapse into the version they wanted you to become. They mistook your silence for delay, never realizing it was the ending. You didn't give them scenes. You gave them absence. And absence is the one thing no manipulator knows how to control. They kept checking for reactions that never arrived. No late-night messages. No emotional spirals. No attempts at closure. Just time moving forward, as if nothing had happened, and that unnerved them more than any confrontation ever could. They built their identity around being the storm in someone else's life. What shattered them was discovering they were no longer the weather. You learned how to walk through without getting wet. They told themselves you would break loudly. Instead, you vanished quietly. And quiet tragedies last longer because there's no sound to warn people they are already standing in ruins. They wanted to be remembered as villains in your story because villains at least matter. What they became instead were footnotes you no longer reread. The tragedy was not that you left. The tragedy was how completely you learned to live without the need to be seen leaving. They tried to provoke reactions with distance, with silence, with sudden warmth and planned cruelty. They were still playing the game long after you stopped recognizing the board. You did not collapse in front of them. You collapsed privately, rebuilt privately, and returned to the world without ever sending invitations to the transformation. And people fear what they didn't witness being formed. They wanted proof that they still owned emotional territory inside you. What they found instead was an eviction they never noticed being filed. Your grief did not become a spectacle. It became architecture. It built walls, structure, boundaries, and quiet rooms where their names were no longer permitted to echo. They wanted drama because drama grants narrative control, but tragedy removes authorship altogether. It does not negotiate meaning, it simply ends what was. They are still trying to understand how the ending arrived without warning them. They don't realize the warning existed for a long time, they just believe they were exempt from consequences. You didn't accuse. You didn't confront. You didn't demand explanations. You just changed your life so thoroughly that their absence became permanent without announcement. They wanted to watch you fall apart so they could measure their power. What dismantled them was realizing they no longer had a measuring system that included you at all. You did not collapse into ruin. You reorganized your world around a version of yourself that no longer required them for definition. They whisper that they don't recognize you anymore, as if recognition were a right they did not forfeit. They mourn the version of you that tolerated things the current version no longer translates. They waited for you to become bitter. You became quieter. They waited for rage. You chose precision. They waited for destruction. You chose departure. That is not drama. That is tragedy. They replay every moment, searching for the exact second where control slipped away from them. They don't understand that it wasn't a moment, it was a process. Erosion never announces the final collapse. You did not explode. You evaporated from the spaces where you were once consumed. They wanted the satisfaction of watching you suffer. What they received instead was the long, slow realization that your suffering no longer included them as an audience. Your silence became its own narrative, not a mystery for them to solve, but a boundary they were never meant to cross again. They imagined the end would leave them powerful. What it left them with was uncertainty. And uncertainty is where people finally meet the consequences of their behavior without protection. They call your transformation cold because it does not center them. They call it cruel because it no longer explains itself to them. But what they really fear is that they are no longer relevant enough to cause damage. They expected your heartbreak to stay suspended around them like gravity. What shocked them was watching it realign around something else entirely, something that did not require their presence to exist. They wanted drama because drama keeps everyone important. You gave them tragedy because tragedy removes importance altogether. They searched for the sound of your collapse like spectators at a delayed explosion. What they got was an empty horizon and the unbearable awareness that the event already happened without them noticing. They thought the story still belonged to them. They did not realize it had ended on a page they were no longer allowed to turn. They wanted to be the reason you fell apart. What they became instead was the reason you learned how to leave without shaking. And that is the most ruthless ending of all. Not to be hated, not to be feared, but to be completely unnecessary to the future that replaced them. They will always struggle with the fact that the ending never gave them the spotlight they craved. No curtain call, no final scene where everyone watches the downfall together. Just a quiet realization that the story slipped out of their hands while they were still rehearsing their lines. They wanted the satisfaction of knowing they mattered in your breaking. What haunts them now is the possibility that they were only a chapter, painful, yes, but ultimately replaceable in the architecture of your becoming. They wanted to be remembered as the storm. What they became was the weather you learned how to survive. The tragedy is not that the relationship ended. The tragedy is that it ended without giving them a role worth remembering. They remained backstage while your life moved into an entirely different production. They still wonder why there was no dramatic farewell, no speech, no confession, no emotional audit of what went wrong. They don't understand that some exits are silent because the damage was never a conversation, it was a pattern. You didn't leave to make them feel small. You left because staying required you to become smaller. That was the choice they never anticipated you would have the courage to make. They thought they would always have time to fix things later. Tragedy has no interest in later. It finishes its work quietly and leaves people holding explanations that arrive too late to matter. Your absence taught them something they were never willing to learn while you were present, that access to someone's heart is not a permanent entitlement. It is a privilege with an expiration date. They tried to reduce your ending to a misunderstanding, a phase, a temporary reaction. But time has a way of confirming what silence already decided. You were never coming back. They still listen for your name in rooms that no longer deserve it. They still flinch at memories that once gave them comfort. They still carry your shadow into moments where you are no longer required. You became the unanswered question in their narrative, the one conclusion they don't control, the one ending that does not bend to revision. They wanted your collapse to validate their importance. What they received instead was a future that moved forward without consulting their past. You didn't walk away as an act of punishment. You walked away as an act of alignment with your sanity, with your worth, with the version of your life that no longer needed suffering to feel meaningful. And that is why this ending hurts differently. There is no villain they can comfortably blame anymore. No dramatic confrontation to relive. No scene to replay where they look powerful. Only the slow, unbearable awareness that they were outgrown. They wanted drama because drama keeps old bonds alive through conflict. You gave them tragedy because tragedy severs bonds so completely that even conflict becomes irrelevant. In the end, they were not defeated by your anger. They were defeated by your peace. They were not undone by your revenge. They were undone by your release. They wanted noise. They wanted fire. They wanted spectacle. What they got was something far worse for their ego, a quiet ending that proved they no longer mattered in the life that replaced them. And that is the final shape of the tragedy. Not that the heart broke, but that it healed in a direction that never pointed back. They want to start over now, not because they finally understand the damage, but because they finally understand the loss. Regret didn't arrive when they were cruel. It arrived when access was revoked. They speak the language of change with mouths that spent years fluent in excuses. They suddenly believe in healing now that the consequences have names and faces and irreversible distance. They talk about the past like it was a misunderstanding instead of a pattern, like years of behavior were an accident instead of a choice they made repeatedly without apology. They want forgiveness without a trial, reunion without repair, a clean slate without acknowledging the blood that stained the last one. But you don't argue anymore. You don't explain. You don't negotiate. You don't even flinch. They try to reintroduce themselves like strangers at a door they once owned. They knock gently now, soft voices, softer promises. But the house behind that door no longer belongs to the person they left behind. They want to restart because the ending didn't flatter them, because the silence didn't give them a heroic role, because the story moved forward without offering them redemption. They say, "Let's talk." But you already had that conversation privately, internally, permanently. They believe distance is temporary because it always used to be. They're waiting for the cycle to reset. They don't realize the cycle was burned down, not paused. They want to rewind to the version of you that still tried, the one who explained feelings, the one who waited, the one who hoped. That person doesn't exist anymore. They mistake your calm for openness, your silence for space, your composure for softness. They still don't understand that restraint is not permission. They ask for one more chance, as if chances were infinite currencies instead of rare investments that only exist while trust still has oxygen. You are not angry enough for them to feel important. You are not emotional enough for them to feel powerful. You are not reactive enough for them to feel relevant. And that destroys them quietly. They want a reset because they cannot survive as the villain in a story they no longer control. They need your participation to rewrite the ending in their favor. But you have already exited the narrative. They offer apologies shaped like bargains, regret shaped like negotiation, accountability shaped like "but you also." You don't argue with arithmetic anymore. You already calculated the total. They promise they've changed. But change that arrives only after loss is not evolution, it's panic. They want to start over because their present is empty without the appeal of your absence. They don't miss who you are now. They miss who you were when you still tolerated them. They want to return to comfort without revisiting the cost. But you don't revisit graves. They talk about fate, about timing, about destiny pulling things back together. They avoid the one word that would actually matter: responsibility. You don't feel tempted. You don't feel curious. You don't feel nostalgic enough to betray your peace. They wait for cracks in your detachment like gamblers watching for tells at a table where the game ended hours ago. They say, people deserve second chances. You quietly agree, just not from you. They want the version of you that used to doubt their own worth. They want the self that mistook longing for love and endurance for loyalty. They cannot comprehend the person you became, the one who learned that walking away is sometimes the purest form of self-respect. They still think emotional access is permanent property. They never learned it was always a lease. They want us again. You've already redefined what me means. They hope time softened you. It sharpened you. They believe you're pretending to be strong. They don't realize strength was built in the silence they left behind. They imagine your indifference is temporary. They don't know indifference is what remains when hope finally dies peacefully. They want to start over because they believe the story owes them another attempt. But stories don't owe anyone anything. They confuse your lack of hatred for forgiveness. They confuse your peace for weakness. They still don't understand that you no longer hate them because they no longer exist in the emotional geography of your life. They want access again. You removed the location. They want connection again. You changed the language. They want to return. You changed the locks without announcing it. They say one more chance, but you are already living inside the chance you gave yourself. They want to start over. You don't give a sheet, not out of bitterness, not out of cruelty, but because the version of you that would have cared finally learned how to choose peace without apology, and that is the ending they will never rewrite. They will always wonder what the exact moment was when the door closed for good. They'll replay conversations, scan old messages, revisit arguments like forensic analysts studying emotional crime scenes. What they will never find is a dramatic timestamp, because the ending wasn't a moment. It was a slow accumulation of everything they ignored. They thought distance would scare you back. They thought silence would starve you into returning. They underestimated what happens when someone finally learns how to be alone without feeling abandoned. They still tell the story as if it's unfinished, as if there's a missing chapter waiting to be written. They can't accept that some stories don't pause, they conclude. They wait for you to miss what broke you. They don't understand that nostalgia dies quietly when peace arrives fully. They think your refusal to restart is stubbornness. They don't see it for what it really is, clarity. They confuse your lack of response for internal conflict. They imagine you pacing, debating, struggling. They don't realize the war ended a long time ago and the battlefield is now empty. They want you to doubt your decision. But doubt doesn't survive where self-respect has finally taken root. They once had unlimited access to your emotional world. Now they can't even locate the entrance. That kind of loss disorients people. They wonder how someone who once gave so much can now give nothing. They never ask themselves what it cost you to give in the first place. They still search for guilt inside you, hoping it will weaken your resolve. What they don't understand is that guilt only thrives where obligation still exists. They want your attention because attention validates their relevance. Your indifference confirms what they fear most, that they no longer matter in the shape of your life. They remember the version of you that waited. They don't know how to speak to the version of you that has already moved on. They wish they had changed sooner. They just never thought they'd run out of time. They want comfort from the very person they made unsafe. They want forgiveness from the one they taught how to leave. They look at your calm and call it cold. They don't understand that cold is what warmth turns into after it's been burned too many times. They still believe love should be unconditional. They never learned that endurance has limits, and those limits are called boundaries. They want the past back because their present doesn't know how to hold them. They want your familiar patience to soften the reality they now have to face alone. They wanted another cycle, another reset, another chance to do just enough to keep you without ever fully changing. What they got instead was the end of the pattern itself. And this is the final truth they will have to carry without your help. You did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because caring had started to destroy you. They wanted to start over. You chose to move forward. They thought the story still belonged to both of you. It never did. It belongs to the one who had the courage to walk away and never look back. And that is the real ending. They expected tears because tears make sense to people who still believe endings should be loud. They expected anger because anger still proves attachment. What they didn't prepare for was nothing. No storms, no breakdowns, just a quiet decision that erased them without shaking the air. You didn't rage because rage still gives energy to the past. You didn't seek revenge because revenge still admits someone mattered enough to chase. You chose the only ending that leaves no fingerprints removal. They waited for you to collapse under the weight of what they did. They didn't realize you had already uninstalled them from your emotional system like a corrupted file. No recovery, no backups, no restore point. They wanted to see damage in you, some crack that would validate their impact. But you didn't fracture, you simplified. You reduced your world to peace and cut out the variable that caused disorder. They thought love guaranteed permanence. They were wrong. Permanence belongs to those who behave with alignment, not entitlement. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped carrying them. They waited for bitterness to stain your voice. But your voice never returned at all. That terrified them more than any curse ever could. You didn't leave in protest. You left in clarity. And clarity doesn't shout, it exits clean. They wanted consequences that looked like suffering. They weren't ready for consequences that looked like absence. You didn't punish them with rage. You punished them with irrelevance. They thought revenge would be how you healed. But revenge still keeps a wound alive. You chose healing that required disappearance instead. They kept imagining you somewhere hurting in silence. They didn't understand silence can also mean peace. You didn't remove them in anger. You removed them the way surgeons remove poison, without apology, without hesitation, without emotion clouding the cut. They expected closure in conversation. They got closure in vanishing. They thought you would always be emotionally reachable. They didn't realize accessibility is a privilege that can expire without warning. You didn't block them to make a statement. You blocked them because statements were no longer necessary. They expected revenge like fire, but you chose ice still, quiet, untouchable. They wanted to matter enough to be hated. You denied them even that. You didn't replace them quickly. You replaced the version of yourself that ever needed them. They thought your departure meant you lost something. They never realized you gained yourself back. You didn't dramatize the exit. Drama requires an audience. You didn't believe they deserved one. They thought revenge was power. They didn't realize removal is sovereignty. You didn't keep score. You ended the game. They waited for emotional debris. There was none. Just a clean horizon where they used to stand. You didn't threaten to disappear. You simply did. They thought your calm meant denial. They didn't know it meant completion. You didn't burn bridges. You erased maps. They imagined your absence would create chaos in you. It created order instead. They wanted to be a chapter you never stopped reading. You closed the book without bookmarking their name. You didn't fade out slowly. You cut the signal permanently. They hoped guilt would summon you back. But guilt only works when access still exists. You didn't need revenge because you weren't trying to win against them anymore. You were winning against what they turned you into. They thought removal would look dramatic, like slammed doors and trembling hands. They didn't understand that the most permanent exits happen without sound. You didn't storm out. You simply withdrew your existence from their narrative like it never belonged there to begin with. They replay moments trying to find the exact second they lost you. But loss doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives disguised as calm, as distance, as a softness that never returns. You didn't say goodbye because goodbye still leaves a doorway open. You chose something colder, an ending without punctuation, without echo. They keep expecting a reaction from you like muscle memory. They forget that reflex dies when the nerve is cut. You didn't disappear to teach them a lesson. You disappeared because your soul selected peace over performance. They wanted pain in your eyes to prove they mattered. Instead, they saw clarity, and clarity terrified them. You didn't move on loudly. You moved on so quietly that by the time they noticed, you were already unreachable. They assumed your silence meant confusion. They never imagined it meant certainty. You didn't erase them out of hatred. You erased them out of accuracy. They waited for your sadness to drag you back. They weren't prepared for your calm to lock them out. You didn't burn their memory. You archived it sealed, labeled, untouched. They thought they'd always be a variable in your equations. You turned them into a canceled term. You didn't seek closure from them because you built it yourself privately, cleanly, without witnesses. They tried to haunt your future with the past. They forgot you changed the locks inside your mind. You didn't stop loving violently. You stopped loving precisely. They thought time would soften your decision. They didn't realize time was the tool that sharpened it. You didn't replace them with another person. You replaced them with your own boundaries. They waited for regret to knock on your chest. They didn't realize you taught your heart not to answer familiar pain anymore. You didn't fade because you were weak. You vanished because you became strong enough not to need presence as proof of worth. They keep checking shadows for signs of you. They don't realize the light you chose doesn't cast backward. You didn't forget them impulsively. You forgot them strategically. They thought your silence meant unfinished business. They didn't see that silence was the receipt that the transaction was complete. You didn't vanish to hurt them. You vanished to finally stop hurting yourself. They cannot understand how someone can leave with no mess behind. They don't know how disciplined your detachment became. You didn't trade pain for revenge. You traded attachment for peace. They still search for meaning in your absence. They don't know the meaning is simple. You chose yourself without debate. They still talk about you as if you might circle back one day like seasons do. They don't understand that some exits aren't seasonal. Some are extinction-level decisions. They try to read between the lines of your silence, but there are no hidden messages anymore. Silence is the message, and it says everything they're afraid to accept. You didn't ghost them impulsively. You studied your own endurance first, tested how long your soul could survive with less pain than attachment. They assumed you would collapse without their presence. They never imagined your nervous system would finally rest. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because caring was costing you your identity. They keep mistaking your absence for avoidance. They don't realize it's discipline. You didn't erase them out of bitterness. You erased them because their chapter no longer matched the direction of your becoming. They thought you'd eventually ask for explanations. They didn't understand that understanding no longer interested you. You didn't need answers because you had already accepted the truth in your body long before your mind caught up. They keep waiting for your anger to rise like a storm. They don't realize the weather inside you changed permanently. You didn't become numb. You became selective about what deserves to reach your emotions. They assumed your silence meant unfinished feelings. It actually meant finished decisions. You didn't remove them dramatically because drama still feeds attachment. You starved the connection instead. They feel abandoned without realizing they were emotionally gone long before you physically left. You didn't shut the door loudly because loud exits still invite echoes. You wanted something soundproof. They still rehearse apologies in private. They don't understand that forgiveness was never on the table because return was never an option. You didn't move on quickly. You moved on thoroughly. They confuse your peace with indifference. They don't understand peace is the reward for choosing yourself without bargaining. You didn't become heartless. You simply stopped giving your heart to situations that kept slicing it open. They think your detachment is cruelty. They don't know it's survival refined into mastery. You didn't vanish emotionally to punish them. You vanished so you'd never have to beg yourself to stay again. You were never supposed to survive what they did to you. That's the part they don't want to admit out loud. You were supposed to break quietly, apologize for wounds you never caused, and remain soft enough for them to use again. What they cannot process now is that you didn't just survive, you adapted. And adaptation looks terrifying through the eyes of those who benefited from your innocence. There was a time when your kindness was mistaken for weakness, when your silence was seen as permission, when your loyalty became a resource they mined without restraint. They thought you were endless. They thought you would keep showing up even as they kept subtracting pieces of you. What they never calculated was the moment when subtraction finally reaches zero. You didn't snap in noise. You didn't explode in chaos. You didn't give them the drama they rehearsed in their heads. You simply stopped bleeding where they could see it. And that quiet withdrawal, clean, final, unapologetic, shook them more than any scream ever could. They still speak your name in rooms you'll never enter again. Not with love, not with respect, but with confusion, with discomfort, with the eerie realization that the version of you they controlled no longer exists. They keep searching for the old access points. Every door is locked. You didn't become cold overnight. That temperature dropped slowly with every betrayal they normalized, every boundary they laughed at, every emotion they minimized. You froze one disappointment at a time until warmth became something you no longer gave away for free. They built your restraint with neglect. They sharpened your focus with disrespect. They trained your detachment with manipulation. And now they stare at the result like frightened architects of their own destruction, unable to recognize the masterpiece they accidentally engineered. You no longer explain yourself. That part of you died in the relationship. You no longer seek closure. That illusion burned down with everything else. You no longer ask for permission to leave rooms that suffocate you. You simply turn your back and erase the address from your mind. They thought distance would punish you. What distance actually gave you was clarity, and clarity is a ruthless teacher. They expected you to come back angry. They prepared defenses for your rage, excuses for their guilt, stories for their conscience. What they were not prepared for was your absence. No arguments, no revenge, no grand confrontation, just a clean deletion. That unsettles people more than any war ever could. You didn't become heartless. You became precise. You learned where to spend feeling and where to withhold it. You learned that empathy without reciprocation is self-destruction dressed up as virtue. You learned that love without safety is not love, it's liability. They still replay moments where they thought they had power over you. They cling to old versions of you like outdated maps, wondering why nothing leads back anymore. They call you changed as if change were a crime instead of the only logical outcome of surviving them. You don't carry hatred for them. Hatred still implies a connection. What you carry now is something far colder and far more permanent: indifference. And indifference is the one emotion they were never prepared to compete with. Your silence speaks in languages they cannot translate. Your calm scares them because it isn't fragile. It isn't pleading. It isn't reactive. It is finished. They created the conditions for your transformation and then recoiled from the result, shocked that consequences had the audacity to show up uninvited. They thought they were shaping you into something small. Instead, they taught you how to be unreachable. You stopped trying to be understood by those who benefited from misunderstanding you. You stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for your growth. You stopped pouring into cups that mocked your thirst. And when you did, everything changed. They expected your downfall to look dramatic. They wanted tears. They wanted chaos. They wanted guilt to weigh you down so heavily that you'd crawl back just to feel forgiven. What they got instead was your stillness, and that was far more unsettling. Now they analyze you like a case study. What happened? They ask. What happened is that you finally saw the pattern. What happened is that you chose yourself without asking for approval. What happened is that you learned how to walk away without looking back. They once loved how easy you were to read. Now they fear how unreadable you've become. Your evolution was never loud, it was methodical. Pain refined you, disappointment disciplined you, loneliness clarified you. And by the time they noticed the shift, the old version of you was already gone beyond retrieval. They want the access without the accountability. They want the loyalty without the responsibility. They want the benefits of your presence without the obligation of treating you right. But the account is closed. The system no longer recognizes them. You didn't turn dark. You turn selective. They accuse you of being distant, as if distance weren't the natural response to repeated disrespect. They call you cold, as if warmth is owed to those who mishandled it. They call you heartless, as if your heart wasn't the exact thing they kept cutting into. What you became was not a monster. You became a mirror they could no longer look into. They only liked your light when it made them look good. They never cared how much of you was consumed to keep that light on. Now that you've redirected it inward, they accuse you of selfishness, as if self-preservation were some kind of betrayal. You don't haunt them on purpose. You haunt them accidentally by thriving where they expected collapse, by smiling where they expected ruin, by moving forward without dragging their names behind you. They imagined your suffering as a footnote in their story. They never expected you to become the entire ending of it. You no longer fight for places that require you to bleed as an entry fee. You no longer negotiate with people who treat your boundaries like suggestions. You no longer explain your worth to those who only understood your usefulness. And the terrifying part for them is this: you didn't lose yourself in the process. You found yourself. They can't handle that the version of you they created through neglect is now untouchable. They can't handle that your composure no longer bends for their comfort. They can't handle that your indifference doesn't grant them redemption. You are not angry anymore. And that is what terrifies them most. Because anger can be manipulated. Anger can be provoked. Anger can be exhausted. But your calm is permanent. They don't miss you. They miss the control. They miss the certainty that you would stay no matter what they did. They miss the safety net of your forgiveness. They miss the emotional labor you provided without compensation. You don't miss them at all. You don't even miss the person you were when you were with them. There's a particular kind of fear that sets in when people realize they are no longer the villain in your story, just a deleted chapter. That fear lives in their silence now, in their late-night second-guessing, in their unspoken regret that arrives too late to negotiate. They created the conditions for your detachment and now suffer the consequences of your peace. You walk differently now. You speak differently now. You love differently now. Not softer, smarter, not less selectively. You don't give your heart out as charity anymore. You invest it like a currency that finally knows its value. They thought breaking you would make you smaller. It made you unrecognizable. And nothing unsettles those who once felt powerful more than realizing the person they tried to destroy no longer even acknowledges their existence. You didn't become a villain in your own story. You became the ending they never saw coming. They whisper now, cautious, almost reverent, as if saying your name too loudly might summon the version of you they can no longer predict. They fear your evolution because it wasn't born from malice, it was born from clarity. And clarity is a far more dangerous weapon than rage. It cuts cleaner. It never misses. They replay old conversations in their heads, dissecting moments they once dismissed, wondering which sentence, which betrayal, which manipulation was the one that finally rewired you. They search for the exact second you stopped caring, but there is no timestamp. Transformation doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a shadow changing shape. They still expect you to respond like the old version of you, the soft one, the forgiving one, the endlessly available one. But that version has retired. And what stands in its place is someone who studies patterns instead of excuses, energy instead of intentions, consistency instead of promises. Someone who can walk away even from what they once prayed for.